David Lady, and I'm the founder of the Ames Research Foundation. One of the reasons I'm smiling is, as you just heard, we're having a little bit of fun with the introductory music to these short videos that we produce. We do produce the entire video in-house, including the music, which is original. It comes across my desk to be approved. The staff was having a little bit of fun with me, and I think I surprised them a little bit by going with that particular tune. Anyway, welcome to our newest video. This is being released in conjunction with our third free study guide that's available in the membership section of the website. And this study guide is called Product Design as Business Strategy. And really, product design or even services, processes, you know, the term process is big today. The idea is that the things that we produce and the way we produce them can be as much as a competitive strategy in the market as other things, as our capitalization, as the need for our product, and those types of things. Obviously, we all talk about innovation all the time. Talking about innovation and innovating, though, can often be very different things. So between this study guide, which product design as business strategy, and the other two that we have out, which is what we call disruptive thinking within the context of operations and the ability to think and plan strategically. These three concepts encompass what we're calling our framework, the Ames framework, which we give it a name, and we call it Forizt, which you'll see has a Z in it. And we did that in honor of what most of this particular study guide is about, which is something called, it's pronounced Triz, T-R-I-Z. I'm a Westerner. I pronounce it Triz, even though that hurts the ears of those who know. It's from a Russian acronym that stands for the theory or the practice of solving problems inventively or innovative problem solving. The translation is not perfect. It's been around since the 1950s and 60s. It's been developed continually since. There's a history of it that you can research. All the links in this. This video is not intended to be an overview of Triz or Trees, although it's at the core. And one of the things we've done in this study guide, which as far as I know, we're the first group to do it, is we've taken it, and it's really an engineering methodology and a way of looking at engineering problems and solving them based upon the standard problem solutions. There's actually 39 standard solutions or 40 principles. We've taken it and we've abstracted it up from an engineering methodology, and we've really turned it into what we think is a pretty good management methodology. And it's a way of looking at management, because remember, one of our themes is that management ought to be more of a science than an art. If it can't be a pure science, maybe. It certainly isn't a pure art. And the idea in there is that intelligent people, given the same information and the same desired outcome, should logically reach the same or similar conclusions. And that's really what we mean when we say that management should be a science. So Forizt, as a framework, encompasses these three ideas. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in this third study guide right now. Gingrich Altshuler is the inventor of Triz, and it's really he considers it a science. There's actually, and I'm going to try and get these links up on our website. On YouTube, there are some fantastic vintage footage videos of him talking about it. He's talking about it in Russian, but they have subtitles in English. And it's a creative science. It's a science of creativity. And he had many of the same views around innovation that we have around management as a science, which is that it's not haphazard, it's not a gut feel. These things are systems. He came up with what in my mind is, if not the best, for the time the best, I still view it as potentially one of the best views and definitions of a system. He actually has, and I think it's in the videos, a very clever way of saying. He said, imagine a system, and we all talk about processes, we all talk about systems theory has become normalized. If you're not familiar with it, there's a mainstream view of it. What Altshuler says is, a system is like a tiny gaggle of dwarves, or birds, or flies in a swarm. And it's constantly moving and constantly changing and constantly shifting. And if we understand to look at systems in that way, what we'll discover is we come up with a lot more ways of moving the system and interacting with the system and changing the system such that it can meet our goals. It's not rigid thinking at all. It's very flexible thinking. And one of the things that a person who studies Triz or trees will discover is that they start to look at the world, they start to look at problems differently. And we call this the Triz mind. And it's a non-rigid way of thinking about systems. Now when I say it's non-rigid, it doesn't mean that it's not structured. As a matter of fact, there are 9 laws of systems evolution that evolved out of Triz or trees. And these laws provide a context to look at the system and try and understand what it's doing in the framework of what we call a contradiction. And the term contradiction goes all the way back to Aristotle, and I think we wrote about this in our first study guide. You can go back and look at it. And he actually came up with what he called the law of non-contradiction, but it's basically the same thing, which is he said you cannot say that a thing both is and is not. That is a contradiction. And the way we're taught from birth is to accept compromises, to accept contradictions, to understand that as we try and solve problems, we're probably going to have to come up with a less than optimal result to our solution to the problem. What the folks who study Triz would say is that might not be the case. What you need to do is you need to break your system down and you need to be able to articulate what they would call the ideal final result. And the ideal final result doesn't necessarily have to be attainable. Matter of fact, one of the concepts within Triz is that the best system, the most ideal system, is one that doesn't exist. So the thing that you wanted done, or the output that you want from a system, because remember a system is input, process, output, happens on its own, happens in nature, happens organically, happens in a way that you don't need a system to make it do it. Now, we all know that those states might not be attainable, but it's a good place to start. And the ideal final result is a way of articulating what it is you're trying to do in a way that everyone can understand. And the interesting thing about the ideal final result is that there can be many of them. And selecting the one that is best, that produces the best outputs for what your desires are, provides everyone who's trying to help you solve the problem with the context to make decisions to resolve those contradictions. So, for example, in the study guide, we have a number of what we call visual problems. And I didn't come up with these. Some of the folks that help us put these study guides together did. It blew me away. I think it's brilliant. And the first one they came up with, which I still love, is a picture of a person standing with a bowling ball, looking up a hill at a series of bowling pins set up just like it would be in a bowling alley. But the hill is up, and then the path is not straight like a lane. It's zigzag. And then the question is, what's the ideal final result for this problem? And depending on who you ask and what their drivers are and what the atmospherics are around their current environment, they can come up with different answers. We've gotten answers everything from, well, the ideal final result is to knock over the bowling pins. We've had that too. There's no ideal final result because there's no contradiction, because there's nothing in the picture that implies the person with the bowling ball wants to do anything with the rest of the picture. And all points in between. The only point there being is you'll discover as you go to articulate this that there are many. What the methodology says is you need to pick one, because that's what's going to drive your resolution. It's going to drive the way you look at the system, and it provides context for the decisions you make to improve that system. If you pick more than one, then you find yourself in a scenario where you're making value compromises, which is one of the things that the methodology says you want to try and avoid. Another thing the methodology does is it defines the definition of a system, and remembering, and it views systems in 4 dimensions. That was the example with the gnomes or the flies. It's not rigid, it's not a 3-dimensional problem. There's a 4th dimension, which is time, because these systems tend to evolve over time. And what the methodology says to do is to break the system down into subsystems such that you get a small enough subsystem to where you only have one contradiction to solve. Now, you might ultimately have to solve a lot of contradictions in each of these subsystems to solve for the larger system. However, once again, clarity is important and context, so that you know that you're making decisions and applying these problem-solving principles in a way that falls within the framework. The other thing that the framework says is that by doing this, what I just said, breaking down the subsystems, identifying one contradiction, and what a contradiction is, you have one piece of the system that you want to improve, and a second piece that you don't want to make any worse. It says once you do that, what you'll discover is the solutions to resolving that contradiction are standardized. there's 39 of them, or 40, depending on how you read the chart. And these are called the 40 principles. So the idea here is that you identify your unique problem in the real world, you abstract it into a generic problem set, you look for solutions, generic solutions to that generic problem set, find the one that works, then bring that down into your real world solution, and you've got an innovative opportunity. Now, I don't want to get into vocabulary linguistics, but there is an important difference between the word innovation and the word invention. And when we say an innovative solution, what an innovation is, at least within the context of this framework, although as far as I know this definition carries, is a unique way of using existing resources, or applying existing resources, or bringing existing resources in and out of systems in a unique way that leads to a beneficial result. Just change for change's sake and spaghetti with peanut butter isn't necessarily the idea here. And that's different than an invention. An invention is something new. Not a new way of using existing things, but something new altogether. So, in the Triz world, we call them objects and actions. An invention is a new object that did not exist before. An innovation is either a new set of existing objects or a new action applied from one object to another in a new way that brings new results. Innovation, invention. Those are important terms. In the laws, we've broken the laws down, and this is again unique to our framework, and we've bent them and genericized them just a little bit so they have a management and a product focus more than a pure engineering focus. But there's three sets of laws: emergent laws, transitory laws, and evolutionary laws. And this becomes a fascinating way of looking at the world, looking at systems. And this applies to internal business processes, it applies to products, it applies to ways of interacting with markets, it applies to all points in between, ways of dealing with folks, not setting aside humanistic causality, but just ways of looking at what they do and helping them see what it is, what the ideal thing is that they're trying to accomplish. Now the emergent laws, and there's 4 of them. I'm not going to go into every single law in this video. You can read about it in the study guide. But these are basically the rules that have to exist for a system. These are the rules that exist, the rules a system must follow to exist. Sorry about that. So in other words, one of the rules says that there's 4 parts to a system. There's something that drives it, like an engine, something that produces energy. There's something that transfers that energy into an object, into an action, into something that we can identify in the real world. In a car, it's a transmission. It's a transitory element of the system. There's the tool or the interface. There's the piece of the system that actually does something, either touches something in the real world, touches information, interacts with the real world. And against those 3, there are control elements, so that you can control and change the way each of those 3 pieces are acting. You have to have those 4 things to exist in order for a system to exist. That's one of the laws. There are 4 others. We call those the emergent laws, because these are the laws that must be present for a system to truly exist. For example, in that model, if you have a system that has no interface that we can discern as a person with the world, whether it be information we look at, whether it be electricity, whether it be a hammer that strikes a nail, if there is no interface, then there is no system. At least not within the context of something that we can talk about and understand. Those are the emergent laws. Then we have the transitory laws, which describe as a system exists, it improves and becomes worse, depending on as it moves through time. And these are the laws that exist within the system as it moves through time. And you can use these when something goes wrong or performance goes down to try and understand that and apply come up with your problem sets to apply against the principles. And then we have the evolutionary laws. And these are generally the laws that the system follow as it reaches ideality, which is another concept in this framework. Ideal. So as a system becomes ideal, there are rules for what happens to it next, which these laws talk about. So those are the 3 breakdowns. There's actually 9 different laws, and you can read about all of those, not only in the guide, you can find them on the internet, you can search for them. What we've done in the guide is put a management overlay on them. And we also have a lot of other information in there that we've slightly modified from some of the original research that was produced on this. So anyway, I've been talking for a while. Our goal is always to keep these videos short. You can see these study guides. If you're not a member of AIMS already, you can sign up. There's a video actually on one of the pages that shows you how to do that. Once you've signed up, it doesn't take 10 seconds. You get access to these guides. They're free. There's a lot of good information, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I'm going to sign off. We'll get to listen to that wonderful music one more time, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.